Over the last couple of decades, the monster hunting genre has more or less been dominated by Monster Hunter World and Rise. Sure, there have been a few AA efforts here and there, but none of them really caught on in terms of popularity like those aforementioned games did. With Wild Hearts, its developer hopes to leave its own mark on the genre with a unique take on monster hunting. And make no mistake, Wild Hearts definitely has a fair number of ideas on how it can try and differentiate itself from its contemporaries. Having spent altogether too much time playing the game, I can safely say that I have a firm grasp on whether Wild Hearts' novelty pays off, or if it's just going to be yet another forgotten monster hunting game. Spoiler, it pays off. Let's get some of the more superficial aspects out of the way. Wild Hearts is a great-looking game. It may not boast the highest resolution assets or the biggest number in its polygon count, but the art direction is incredibly strong, making the game's feudal Japan-inspired aesthetic spring to life. Wild Hearts goes for a vibrant, colorful look, and it pays off in spades, resulting in not only gorgeous vistas and jaw-dropping arenas to fight the game's monsters in, dubbed the Kameno, but also in clarity when it comes to actually figuring out what's happening in gameplay. Not only are the big Kameno that you have to hunt as part of the game's quest clearly visible, each with a unique silhouette that makes them pretty easily identifiable, but even the smaller aspects, like resources that can be gathered, fishes that can be fished, and rabbits that can be pet, are visually obvious. Despite Wild Heart's borderline oversaturated color palette, things never get muddled with the background, and you can just about always make out the most important things. On the audio side of things, Wild Hearts has some soaring orchestral tracks that make heavy use of strings and traditional Japanese musical instruments, and it meshes quite well with the Japanese aesthetics the game is going for. Needless to say, when it comes to how it looks and sounds, I did not find Wild Hearts lacking. Now for the meat and potatoes, the core gameplay. Wild Hearts, like any other hunting game, is more or less defined by its offering of weapons, and the targets that you use those weapons on. Let's start by talking about the weapons of Wild Hearts. Despite offering only 5 weapon types at the beginning, expanding into 8 distinct types of weapons once you reach a certain point in the story, variety is never a problem. Owing to the limited selection of weapons, each one has unique gameplay elements attached to them, mechanics unique enough that other games might use a single weapon type as the core basis of their entire gameplay. When it comes to actually using and learning these weapons, there's definitely a bit of a learning curve. A training dummy available in the early game right outside of the camp and eventually manually constructible, we'll get to the building aspect soon, does quite a bit to alleviate the learning curve by giving you a quick rundown of some of the combos. However, players coming from games like Monster Hunter Rise might find the tendency of weapons in Wild Hearts to constantly move the character in a certain direction fairly off-putting. It's an important aspect of the game's core combat design. However, as the beasts you take on are incredibly mobile, giving the player just a tiny bit of extra mobility through their weapons actually does quite a bit to help balance the scales. There are plenty of options in the creatively designed weapons too, from the constantly growing and shrinking maul to the arrow-swapping gameplay of the bow, and even to the Attack on Titan-inspired flashiness of the claw blade. Just about every kind of player will find a weapon that they love using. I personally got quite attached to the transforming Karakuri staff, the hard-hitting Nodachi, and the quick and agile claw blade. Really, the only problem with the core combat of Wild Hearts is that the camera can often have trouble keeping up with the action. If you find yourself fighting Kameno in a forest filled with trees, or more often than not if you're just trying to climb a Kameno's body to try and deal some damage to a weak point, the camera often goes haywire. And unfortunately, this also has the side effect of making your directional controls go haywire. Coupled with the unfortunate implementation of the lock-on system, which insists on keeping the target in the center of your screen at all times, adds quite a bit to the learning curve. Wild Hearts could do well with a target camera system like Monster Hunter Rise or World. Of course, the other core aspects of the gameplay in Wild Hearts is the ability to build things. Players can place down structures of varying complexity, be it something as simple as a crate or a spring, to more complicated structures like a spring-loaded hammer, to entire base camps and buildings. These structures are called Karakuri, and they form the central basis of the Wild Hearts story. Far from being just a gimmick, Karakuri are actually one of the most interesting aspects of Wild Heart, and the biggest way it differentiates itself from the recently released Monster Hunter games. Essentially, the Karakuri that players can build are split into 3 distinct categories: Basic, Fusion, and Dragon. Basic Karakuri, as its name might imply, is simple stuff like crates, springs, and torches. Fusion karakuri are combinations of basic karakuri that turn into more intricate contraptions, like a bomb or a spring-loaded hammer to bonk Kameno with. Dragon karakuri is where you find your base building stuff, like tents, forges, and even traversal structures like ziplines. Karakuri, especially the basic and fusion kind, quickly become yet another tool in your arsenal during hunts. It's surprising how natural and quickly it comes to just put down a block for jumping attacks or spring for a quick dash away from danger. And once you figure out openings in Kameno attack patterns, you can make use of fusion karakuri to plant a bomb. When it comes to just fighting, the possibilities are surprisingly limitless and cater to just about every playstyle out there. On the subject of base building, Wild Hearts offers an incredible level of freedom on the level of Death Stranding. Much like Hideo Kojima's Strand game, you're not only free to build an entire network of zip lines covering the whole map, but you're downright encouraged to do so with how well the map in Wild Hearts plays with vertically. Considering how big and dense the maps can get, you'll also want to freely build new base camps that allow you to fast travel between each other. It certainly helps that you can destroy anything you're not using to get a full refund on the building resources. Experimentation is encouraged, and more often than not, rewarded when it comes to building in Wild Hearts. Speaking of maps, Wild Hearts has 4 distinct regions, each with their own theme: flora, fauna, and interestingly, seasons. This means that every map gives you a different vibe altogether. Be it enjoying autumn time hunting in the Akikure Canyon, or an icy hunt in the frozen Fusagi Fort, every single map has plenty of secrets hidden away in their cliffs and canyons, and offers interesting arenas to fight the Kameno in. Alongside the karakuri and the weapons, the Kameno are the absolute stars of Wild Beasts. Not counting a few variants, all the Kameno are incredibly varied, with even the largest among them offering nothing short of a breathtaking cinematic battle. Wild Hearts does incredibly well with the design of its beasts, mixing animals with nature for some truly unique designs. Right from the beginning, the Ragetail and Sapscourge are interesting hunts in their own right, but the deeper into the game you get, the more interesting the Kameno designs become. I was often surprised by how often I stopped just short of starting fights with these monsters to just observe them and their intricate designs. Of course, every Kameno has its own unique set of armor, with a few twists along the way. Much like in the new Monster Hunter games, armor in Wild Hearts gives you different skills that improve your ability to hunt. What sets Wild Hearts apart, however, is its unique take on upgrades. You are encouraged to invest materials into pieces of armor to make them take on more human aspects or more monstrous aspects inspired by the Kameno, whose parts are used to craft the pieces. Alongside the endless possibilities for fashionable outfits, this also introduces a new level of customization, since going down the human path or the Kameno path will activate and deactivate unique armor skills. This, coupled with the way weapon upgrades can inherit their own unique skills along a vast upgrade tree, means that the min-maxers among us will have a lot of fun figuring out the most optimal ways to deal damage. And just like about everything else in Wild Hearts, the armor sets are also meant to invoke a feudal Japanese aesthetic, be it through thick samurai armor, agile ninja gear, or even intricate kabuki masks. There's no shortage of choices here, despite the singular aesthetic throughline cutting through it all. Last but not least, let's talk about the story. Wild Hearts places a surprising amount of emphasis on its story. Rather than simply having a story as an excuse to put you into fights with bigger and badder beasts, Wild Hearts instead wants you to learn more about its characters, and over time, maybe even grow attached to them. While much of the character development is left for side quests that often take the form of multiple part questlines, each one with its own self-contained plot, the core cast of characters still get quite a few moments to shine. An easy example, without spoiling anything, comes with the first cinematic hunt of the game. Characters like the blacksmith Natsume, the aging samurai Uchishigi, and the scholar Suzerain all get moments to shine in helping your character fight off a dire threat, with all the incredible swells in the game's orchestral score that you'd expect from a heroic scene. There are also several side characters that, while not altogether present in the story, have a surprising amount of storylines through side quests. For example, the merchant Kogyoku has an entire murder mystery plot that revolves around a specific side quest chain. Whether you actually end up enjoying the characters or not is entirely subjective. While just about everything is played for drama with little in the way of comedy, I personally found the characters quite endearing, especially once they started accompanying me in some of the story hunts, letting us get to know them better and their backstories in the process. It's also worth noting that alongside its visual aesthetics, the writing in Wild Hearts is also incredibly Japanese. Even with the English voice acting, which incidentally is quite well done, characters have an obvious Eastern Asian accent to them. and conversations will often see Japanese words peppered throughout. Rather than just saying thank you, an NPC is more likely to say arigato. Just about everything in Wild Hearts has a thick layer of the Japanese aesthetic to it, and while this may put some players off, it actually works out quite well in the end. Be it the myth and the folklore inspired Kameno, the Japanese architecture, or environments that are almost definitely inspired by Japanese artwork. Depending on how long you spend farming for new equipment, the story might take players anywhere from 25 to 50 hours, also depending on your level of skill. Completionist runs will likely take even longer, but honestly, most of your time playing Wild Hearts will likely be spent in multiplayer, regardless of whether you end up joining random players to help them out with hunts, summoning in help for tough battles of your own, or just hang out with friends as you try to build a cozy base alongside the shores of Natsukadashi Isle. When it comes to negatives, Wild Hearts is surprisingly sparse. Like I mentioned earlier, the camera could certainly use some more refinement, especially when it comes to trying to scale the Kameno in the middle of a hunt. Some players might also face performance issues, depending on their hardware. I faced a few frame drops here and there while playing Wild Hearts on a PC, running a Ryzen 5 3600, an NVIDIA GeForce RTX 3060 Ti, and 32GB of RAM, but nothing serious enough to hinder my enjoyment of the game. I was largely able to maintain steady frame rates of 60 FPS for the vast majority of playtime. It is worth noting that players have been reporting performance issues with the 10-hour demo that is currently available, though, through EA Play. I imagine that a fair number of performance issues likely stem from the absurd level of customization that Wild Hearts offers in the form of allowing you to build various structures that can quite freely be used and destroyed, alongside destructive elements of these environments. It's easy to imagine the kind of strained destructible structures and environments might put on processing power, especially on lower-end hardware. Wild Hearts is a great new entry in a genre that's more or less dominated by a single franchise. Despite taking many ideas from its competition, Wild Hearts manages to forge its own identity through a healthy mix of incredible creature designs, a fun story, gorgeous environments, fun weapons, and intricate construction abilities. Rather than coming off as a cheap knockoff, Wild Hearts instead feels like a revitalizing new release, offering some much-needed competition for the recent Monster Hunter games. A few issues that will likely see fixes throughout software updates aside, Wild Hearts is an admirable fresh attempt at monster hunting. Hey, did you know that we at GamingBolt upload new videos every day? Stick around, drop a like, subscribe, and hit that bell, and let us know what kind of content you'd like to see in the future with a comment below.